What's going on, everyone? It's LaShawn. Thank you for stopping by in another video. I want to take some time off from study from the MCAT to do a video on personal statements. Now, this is probably one, I'll probably do multiple videos on personal statements for different levels. Certainly I'll do one for medical school, certainly one for summer programs, research programs like Amgen. But this one today I want to do for PhD programs. PhD programs have deadlines now, end of November, first week of December. So I just wanted to do some quick tips on things that, I've wrote a lot of personal statements, helped a lot of people with personal statements, to just give some tips on how to write a stronger personal statement. Again, this is geared to PhD programs, but certainly you can draw parallels from these tips into any piece of writing that you do. The first tip that I have is to form a narrative, right? And for me, I like to think about writing a personal statement as a story, as a piece where you want the reader to sit down with a nice cup of coffee, tea, whatever their favorite drink, sitting down, on their couch and just enjoying your writing. And so I like to tell students that I mentor when I write my own to form a narrative, form this story where the reader gets a little bit of who you are. And when it comes to PhD programs, I like to start off with, where the idea of you becoming a scientist was planted, right? Talk about that time when that seed was planted. And certainly you can do this for any personal statement, but give the reader that first instance where you can, that you're cognizant, or that you can at least remember when the idea of you wanting to pursue a PhD, or you wanting to, interest in science, was planted. I mean, for me, I grew up in New York City, and so there's a lot of, New York City prides itself in the public libraries, and so I would always go to these libraries and read. And one thing I enjoyed reading was like earth science and like geology and how rocks were formed and all these stuff. And so I remember that at least I didn't know it obviously at the time, but that was when my interest in science was sort of born. And so if you have something like that, talk about that time. It can be a defining moment. My other tip is that you want to create your story in a chronological order. You definitely don't want to tell your whole life story, but certainly you want to have a chronological order where the reader can sort of see your progress from where you started into why you wanted to go to a PhD into their school. And certainly by having a narrative of having sort of a defining moment where that seed was planted, makes it easier to write. My second tip is write in a proactive voice. And what I mean by that is that I recommend to my students, you hear that they sort of talk about a research experience that they miraculously got into, right? Whether they begged the professor or, they just got into by chance. And that may be true, but I'm certainly of the opinion that you should write in a voice where everything you do is proactive, right? If you got into a research experience, write it as if you were the one that calculated and made that move. Like, okay, I went into University of Michigan for the summer, so you said I pursued it, instead of saying the professor reached out to me, X, Y, and Z. Because the idea is that you want to demonstrate to the admissions committee that you're someone who, knows what they want and has proven it, because every move that you have made up until that point was deliberate, was calculated. So again, when you talk about a research experience, I went to NYU for the summer, you definitely want to say, you don't want to say, I begged this postdoc to take me, or, my professor had to do connections. No, say something along the lines was like, I actively pursued, reach out to this professor 20, 30 times. But the idea is you want to maintain a proactive voice, and you want to come off that you made every move that you made was calculated, was thought out, right? Because you don't want it to seem second guessing in any way. And I've seen a lot of students do this, right? When they talk about their research experience, right? They talk about it in a manner where it's like, okay, did you want to do this research experience? Were you coerced? And so the idea is that you want to come off as proactive. And, for me, an example I can tell you is that, in my journey, I spent the summer at University of Michigan, and immediately after that, I got a position in the lab at NYU. And so I went to University of Michigan because I was interested in Michigan. I was interested in neuroscience. They're big in neuroscience. And so when I described my transition from University of Michigan and then going back home and going to this lab at NYU for the full academic year, I explained why. I told them that, the truth is I read a book, and that's how I got interested in the lab at NYU, but I didn't write all of that. But what I did say was that, I enjoyed my time at the lab in the University of Michigan. It sparked my interest for X, Y, and Z, which was a learning and memory lab, but it was just basic learning and memory. And so I wanted to do that. I wanted to stay in the realm of learning and memory, but I wanted to do it on the context of fear. So that's proactive. Like I said, okay, since this is what I learned, I enjoyed my time at the University of Michigan, I wanted to do something under the free learning, like fear and stuff like that. So I went into NYU. And so that's what I mean about being proactive. Tell the reader that every move that you made was calculated, that you knew at that time what you were doing. My next tip is you want to connect each paragraph, right? So when I talked about my experience from Michigan to NYU, I kind of said that. I said I was proactive, but I said a reason why. So when you talk about when you went from one research experience to another, or you went from one field into another, maybe the reason is as simple as, we had a change of heart. We took a course and we just became interested in whatever field, and that's why we changed. So say that, but nonetheless, whatever your reason is for going from one experience to another, as you transition from each paragraph, tell the reader why, connect that, right? So as again, I went from University of Michigan to NYU because I wanted to continue on the path of learning and memory, but NYU was on the context of fear. So you want to explain that. So in my journey, then another one is reason was like, I went into University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, to study immunology. And my reason for doing that was because I took an immunology class. I was very interested in it, and I still had my neuroscience interest. So I went to Chapel Hill because they had neuroimmunology. And so that's where I frame it. So you want to connect each paragraph. You want to let the reader know that you went from one experience to the other, and it was deliberate. It was, you had a reason for doing so. And then with that, when you talk about your experience, of course, you want to describe your research. You don't definitely want to talk about, I pipetted 10 mils and I did X, Y, and Z. You don't want to get the small-minded details, but you definitely want to talk about the bigger picture. You certainly want to talk about your project. I should say that when you talk about every research experience, say the full name of the professor. A lot of students just say Dr. Pena, Dr. Joe, Dr. Lays, or like whoever. Maybe obviously you know who that PI is, but the people that are reading your admission statements, they don't know who these professors are. So first things first, when you're describing your research experience, say the full name of the professor and of course the institution. But when you talk about your research in a brief way. You don't want to say the minor details. That stuff you can talk about during interviews. But when you talk about your research, definitely talk about the bigger picture, talk about some of the things that you did, especially if there's techniques that are specific to the lab, and talk about what you learned. And when I say talk about what you learned, talk about scientifically, right? Did this research experience teach you how to, search the scientific literature? Did it teach you how to perform research? Like, what did it teach you scientifically? But also talk about the intangible things, right? It sparked my interest in pursuing a PhD, or it solidified my commitment in getting a PhD in neuroscience or genetics. But you want to talk about it both levels. You want to talk about how the research experience influenced you short term, right? How it will go from that position to the next, but also long term. When you look back, how did it impacted you to get where you're at now, right, to pursue a PhD. So again, each research experience, when I write my personal statement, I end with saying how it influenced me short term, right, and then how it influenced me long term. 3 more quick tips. I also say, when you're writing your personal statement, you have to make it specific to institution. I've worked in the admissions committee for different programs. As I said, I wrote personal statements myself, but one of the things that when I served in the admissions committee that I've seen is that, students don't talk about why you want to come to this institution. We know that certain institutions are respected, they're well known, they're elite, right? And so we know that, but why do you want to come here? I mean, I can tell you, sometimes students do provide a reason. I remember a student writing, I want to go to Stanford because it's beautiful, the weather is nice. I mean, it made me chuckle. She did have a reason, but that's not a legit reason. So when you talk about, you're applying to these PhD programs, tell the schools why you want to go to that program. I want to go to your institution because of the research. I want to go to the institution because of the professors. I want to go to the institution because you have a history or a reputation for getting students, involved in academia and industry or in the government. Some of these schools have connections with the government, or some of these schools, go to Stanford, you go to Silicon Valley in the Bay Area, those schools are around industry. So if you want to have that industry, the entrepreneurship, startup, that's what you want to do with your scientific training, then you can go to one of those schools. Or if you want to, focus on whatever, like it depends. Like, so you have to find out the reasons why you want to go to the institution and tell them. Go beyond, obviously the reputation. And I want to go to Stanford because of X, Y, Z. So when I wrote about Stanford, I talked about the interdisciplinary research, the collaboration, right? I talked about, Stanford. When I think about Stanford, I think about people that are limitless. So definitely people that I think big, people that have questions in immunology, neuroscience, genetics, like they don't have limits. I also thought about, I didn't know what I wanted to do at the time with my PhD. I thought about teaching, but at the same time, I can see myself running my own startup. I can see myself working in government. And so I wanted to be at a school where it would give me opportunities to explore all those opportunities, right? So, also Stanford has a connection with the business school with Spark, Ignite. So these are programs where you can take your ideas from the lab and sort of formulate a product. And so that's why I wanted to go to Stanford. So you have to identify the reasons why you want to go to a certain institution and tell them that, right? It makes it. You want to convince that the admissions committee, the person that's reading your personal statement, that you know what you're talking about, and that if admitted, that you're going to make the most out of that opportunity. And the way you do that is by showing them that you've done your homework. Research the school, see what it has to offer, right? It can be something as simple as the curriculum. Look, I don't like to teach, and so I want to focus on my PhD training just doing research and taking the minimum amount of classes. So then you can say that, but give the reasons why. If you don't provide the reasons why and you talk about the research, then it's hard to convince the reader that you want to be at that school, that you belong there, why they should take a risk with you. And so two more stuff I want to say is that also, when you're talking about the reason why you want to go to that school, mention professors. I mean, I always see this. You talk about PhD programs, just give them a couple of names. I always recommend 3 to 6 names of professors that you would be interested in working with if you're admitted into that school, right? And the thing is, a lot of students sort of they say, oh, well, will the admissions committee hold me to that? No, not at all. It just gives the idea to the reader that you have an idea of who you want to work with. If you're invited for an interview at that institution, what will happen is that they will ask you again, who would you be interested in work with, so they can pay you with that interview. But again, when you talk about why you want to go to that school, give the reasons why, but definitely say, look, if admitted, I'll be interested in work with X, Y, and Z, 1, 2, 3, and here are the reasons why. And then lastly, I want to say is that when you're writing your personal statement, definitely I would say a paragraph, but if you can, have a few sentences of why you want to get your PhD, because you have to answer that question. Getting your PhD or going to grad school or anything is a commitment, right? You cannot say, I want to go to get a PhD because I love research. You do not need a PhD to go do research. You can do research as a tech. You could go master's, right? There's many levels you can do research where you don't need a PhD. A PhD is hard. A PhD is a grind. What we don't understand is what we do as an undergrad, it's not the same what you do as in grad school. There's a lot more failure. There's a lot more independence. And what I mean by the independence is like you being by yourself, because you have to formulate these projects and these ideas. And so you have to convince the reader why you want to get a PhD, right? But why you want to embark on the next 4, 5, 6, 7, even 8 years of your life to get a PhD. And so by convincing them, by telling them why you want to get a PhD, you can, sort of give them an idea of why you're embarking on this journey. So again, telling them what you want to do in the future, they won't hold you to that. You certainly can say, I want to be a professor at a level. I want to be a professor at a research intensive institution or at a liberal arts school, like whatever. But you got to give them a reason why you want to get a PhD. And tell them, again, they won't hold you, but when I read a personal statement, I want to have an idea that this person that I'm reading has an idea of what they want to do. And again, I'm not going to hold you to it, or anyone's going to hold you to it. They're not going to be like, hey, LaShawn, you said you wanted to become a professor. You're not doing that, so we cannot accept you, or we have to take your degree back. No, but you want to definitely show the reader that you have an idea of what you want to do afterwards. And again, in that paragraph, I would just reiterate overall who am I and why they should admit you. So those are my quick tips. So please let me know if you have any questions, any concerns. As I said before, I will do videos on medical school. I will do videos on personal statements, on other stuff. I will do a video explicitly on what I learned serving on the admissions committee for different programs, and I can tell you a little bit about how that works. Definitely won't disclose any important information, although I don't have any secrets. But nonetheless, I do have tips and stuff like that, and mistakes that I've seen a lot of students make. So if you have any questions, any concerns, if you need any help formulating, I know the deadline is a couple of weeks. I think actually next week, but still nonetheless, let me know. So thank you for stopping by, and stay blessed and work hard.